Obviously, another tightly contested show with these open men. As always, it's very close contest when these top guys come here and are in shape. And overall, I thought that these guys did a good job of bringing in solid condition and good packages to the show. So first we'll start off with Derick and Hadi since they were first and second, and I think it was very close between the two. And then we'll move down the placing order. So we'll go pose by pose. First up is the front double bicep pose. This pose, along with quite a few other poses, I think are pretty close when it comes to deciding who wins the pose. In the front double bicep, for Derick, obviously he has great taper, a nice small waist. For Derick, his legs were definitely up in size. He definitely kept his leg size for this show. You see nice deep lines in the separation throughout his legs. You see good leg width from the front, and he just held on to more volume in his legs. Obviously, a weakness for Derick in this pose is his inner arms don't really have much detail, and obviously he doesn't really have much of a bicep peak. Now we move over to Hadi. Again, Hadi and Derick are built very similarly. So you see, again, a very nice taper into a nice small waist, the flaring lats. Hadi is very conditioned. You go down to the lower body and the legs are very conditioned, but you see that the legs definitely do not have the same size as Derick's. They're separated, they're definitely conditioned, and then you just don't see that same leg width throughout the legs and the quads, and also the same sweep. I would say that Hadi also has a little bit less sweep on the right side than the left. It was pretty evident that it was a little bit imbalanced between those two legs, but overall the leg size just was not the same as Derick's. Bicep wise and inner arm detail, he obviously has much better bicep peaks and more detail in the biceps. So as you can see, it's a very close pose. They both have that very nice taper. When it comes to the arms, Hadi has the better arms. When it comes to the legs, Derick has the better legs. Separation through the legs, Derick has a little bit better separation in the legs and obviously a little bit better size. Hadi's conditioning of the muscles themselves are a little bit better. The feathering was there. Throughout the upper body, I would say that Hadi was a little bit more conditioned with a little bit more detail overall as well. But obviously Derick was in shape here and still conditioned too. For me, because of the overall size, really, I think there's a little bit of a size difference overall. I gave this pose to Derick by a hair to make it 1 pose to 0. Next up is the front lat spread pose. For both these guys, I don't think it's their strongest pose. It's not weak by any means, but I don't think it is their strongest pose. So first with Derick, you can see that actually the size and the detail on his outer arms are much better than what his inner arm looks like when they're raised up for the front double. He had good volume and cap to his delts. Chest wise, his chest lacks, some of that striation and detail. I think it looks thicker in some poses than others. You can see really just a touch of thickness, especially through the lower pecs in this pose, but he definitely could use more thickness and more of that detail and striation throughout the upper pec and whole entire chest as a whole. Again, he has very wide lats going down into a nice small waist. He does have detail in the midsection throughout the abs. And then like I stated about his legs before, the legs were solid here. We move over to Hadi. For me, Hadi's chest is actually even flatter than Derick's. What I mean by this is the muscle itself doesn't look as thick. You don't really see the thickness there. His chest is obviously a little bit more separated, but it doesn't have that same separation and striation and detail that you see in his chest in some of these other poses. Going to the outer arms and shoulders, I actually think Derick in this pose, his outer arms have more volume and more mass to them than Hadi's. Derick's shoulders also have more volume and mass to them than Hadi's as well. Hadi's shoulders are a little bit flat. You can see the shape of the shoulders here. It's just not the same as Derick's. But again, he has very wide lats going down into a nice small waist. He definitely has detail throughout the abs and the midsection. And then again, his lower body is conditioned, but the lower body is not the same as Derick's. So because I think the outer arms and shoulders and the chest, how it all flows on Derick compared to Hadi, I think Derick is better there. Plus Derick's advantage in the legs. I gave this pose to Derick to make it 2 poses to 0. Next up is the side chest pose. For Derick here, again, you can see his outer arms and shoulders are actually not bad at all. So for arms being, a weakness for him when they're raised, whenever they're in these side poses, they actually look very solid. I mean, just compare it to Hadi. Right here. Again, Derick's shoulder, I think, is better than Hadi's shoulder. Derick's outer arms have a little bit more of that volume and roundness. Hadi has a little bit more of that peak to the bicep here. So all things considered, they're very similar. I think width throughout the top from shoulder to shoulder, meaning shoulder throughout the chest to the back shoulder, I think Derick is wider. I also think that actually Derek's chest is thicker than Hadi's. You can see that chest flatness here. And even with the back pec that's pushed over, you can see Derek's is thicker than Hadi's as well. They both keep their midsections tight, go down into the lower body, and you see that Hadi's legs are a little bit smaller than Derek's. They both have very good separation and detail to them, but you just see more of that density and mass to Derek's leg. And obviously they're both in very good condition. So for me, again, because of where Derek beats Hadi in this pose, especially throughout, actually both the upper and the lower body for me, I thought this was a pretty clear pose to Derek to make it 3 poses to 0. Next up is the back double bicep pose. Obviously we know Derek has a very, very crazy back double bicep. His back itself is, ridiculous. He has very good depth and thickness to it. Very nice width into a nice small waist. I think his legs from the back looked pretty big. He kept really, I think, solid size on his legs this time around. You can see he has obviously accentuate the leg width here in Derek from the back. Shoulders solid from the back. Not the most overpowering, but solid. Again, arms here, you see he has solid tricep development, but the bicep peak in development could stand to be better. Now we move over to Hadi. Hadi's back itself compared to Derek, Hadi's back has good width. Doesn't quite match Derek's width, but the real difference here is the density to the back. As conditioned as Hadi is throughout the chest and the midsection from the front, you don't see that same conditioning in the back here. So it just doesn't have that depth and 3D look to it. Go down into the lower body, and again, you don't see that development and leg width or even hardness again to the legs in the lower body that you do in Derek's. So for me, I think this is a very clear pose for Derek. I think he exposes a lot of Hadi's weaknesses here to make it 4 poses to 0. Next up is the back lat spread pose. Now, this is another pose that I think is very, very close. Why? Because, again, the lower body difference, I think Derek has the advantage in the lower body here. However, when we move into the upper body, I think that Derek is not opening up every time that he hits this pose. So you can see the density and the thickness that Derek has to his back. Again, his triceps, rear delts, everything actually looks very solid here. But the back itself, he's not opening it up to display the width that obviously he has. Hadi, on the other hand, does a very, very good job of opening up his back all the way. So you see thickness and density in detail throughout his back. Also, his lats look wider than Derek's in this pose, but he has the disadvantage in the lower body. Really, I think this is a very close pose because while Hadi's width is better, you still see that Derek has that thickness and 3D look, and Derek's lower body is overall better. But for me, I think this pose went back and forth a lot. It really all depended on how Derek was opening up the lats. And I ended up giving this pose to Hadi, definitely because of the width and how he opened up his back to make this 4 poses to 1. Next up, we're going to move into the side tricep pose. Again, here from the side, you see kind of a little bit more of the size difference between Derek and Hadi at this show. Really in this pose, you can see, I think even a little bit more than the side chest, the difference in the size of their legs, the density of their legs. So I think Derek has a lower body advantage here. Now, when it comes to the upper body, again, I think that Derek's chest is a little bit thicker than Hadi's. You can see Hadi's striations, though, a little bit more in this pose in the side chest and his backpack. Going to the outer arms and shoulders, again, I feel like the tricep development, the shoulders, just the outer arm in general is a little bit better on Derek's. Both their midsections are tight. They both have good abs, but Hadi's obviously, that's his one crazy advantage. He has that crazy, crazy obliques and ab detail. So for me in this pose, again, because of the lower body advantage and overall size and thickness and roundness, I gave this pose to Derek to make it 5 poses to 1. Next up is the abdominal and thigh pose. For Derek, I think he's definitely improved this over time. You see now nice taper going down into his waist. We see much more ab development in detail than he previously showed. Arms overhead, arms are okay. Obviously, he doesn't have that detail and peak that others have. Go down into the lower body. Again, the legs, they held size and thickness and had good separation to them. However, when you move over to Hadi, this is always one of his strongest poses. This is one of his strengths, is his core and detail to the midsection. He has great taper, chest looks full. He has the biceps that are peaked, development good. Go down to the lower body, and even though his legs are down a little bit, you see the conditioning throughout. Overall, just the flow of the pose and the conditioning that gets brought out, especially through the midsection. I thought this was a clear pose for Hadi to make it 5 poses to 2. Then lastly, we have the most muscular pose. Again, I felt like Derick has improved this pose. He still needs more of that thickness and striation and detail throughout the chest. However, outer arms and shoulders definitely looked better. Legs kept the size, like I said, so everything holds for the lower body from the front that I said before. Even though Derick got better, you still go over to Hadi. Again, this shows off all of his strengths, the detail and conditioning throughout his chest, his midsection. Here, his chest, well, it still isn't as thick enough, and it shows the crazy detail and striations throughout the chest. His arms and shoulders tend to look a little bit better in this most muscular pose when he has his fists touching together like this. So the development in the outer arms and shoulders is there. Again, the legs are a little bit downsized, but you see the striations and conditioning throughout the legs. Obviously, the scores were Derick won pre-judging 6-9. Hadi won finals 7-8. I felt like personally that Derick's conditioning from Friday to Saturday night, as the night moved on, his conditioning lessened on Saturday. So it wasn't quite the same as it was Friday night. And I felt for Hadi, he came back a little bit more conditioned Saturday night compared to Friday night. Obviously, there's a couple of judges that switched their scores, but it wasn't enough for Hadi to take it home. Derick had too big of a lead. But it makes sense, like I said, because there's poses that are very close to each other. The front double bicep pose is close. The back lat spread is close. The front lat spread is close. Even the side tricep is relatively close enough that I can see arguments for Hadi, even though I think it was a Derick pose. So depending on which way the judges were going, you can give either guy basically almost all those poses. That shows you how close it always is with these two. They're structurally, they're built very similar. And when they're both on like this, it is definitely very hard to judge them. But I thought they both did a great job. I think that Derick's lead definitely was enough. I felt like he was for sure the clear winner on Friday. I think Saturday it was much, much more debatable which one should take it home. So at the end of the day, I feel like this was a solid decision, and Derick was able to barely squeak out another win on one of his main rivals.